you see me? This stuff's still here. Who do you belong to? And where are they now? You're still here. I've got to go, but I'll be back. Has anyone else ever discovered this space? It's like nobody ever comes in here. No one's come back for their toy. Should never stay here too long. I'm expected to always keep moving, you know? At least a little bit. You know, I'm gonna put this right here. Hi. I've been thinking about this place for the past couple of weeks. It's really neat that this place is here and that no one else ever seems to have discovered it in the meantime. It's kind of a time capsule room for me. I'd leave stuff here, but I never carry anything with me. Not really supposed to. I get visited by interstellar particles, small planetoids, meteors, stuff like that, who give me what I need. Salami sandwiches and pomegranate juice, usually. They've even designated photons, X-rays, UV rays, all that. This is Photon Kid with green dreadlocks. We've got platoons of them bounding around the system. I guess some of them take orders and radio them out. Depends on the range, I guess. I don't know how all the nitty-gritty admin stuff works. I better get going. You know, how could I forget about this stuff? My little crabby friend. You know what? I think I even positioned this toy somewhere. I guess I screwed that up. I'll see you next time. Do most people's careers plateau? Not sure if my career's plateaued. I think my performance here is okay. My sorties in this room are really my only indiscretion. I think that's really pretty mild. Most systems that include unpredictables plan on the small indiscretions that are bound to occur, and they reabsorb them in such a way that stability is maintained. Actually, not exactly sure what would happen if these little updates of mine became known to my bosses. After all, they've got their own PR department in charge of documenting this whole thing. Nice thing about this job is it's a guaranteed lifetime position. And again, the position ends when its lifetime does, just like the components of the system we're modeling. Of course, I think about other stuff, all sorts of stuff, all the time. Not just a work machine. I don't see how anyone can be. I guess that'll be the thing I say this time. In some respects, seeing old friends in this scenario isn't much different than from other, more conventional scenarios. People enter and leave any one neighborhood according to the season and annual landmarks. Oftentimes, whether we experience a conjunction with someone or not depends only on when and in which direction we look. I've got 2 or 3 close friends that I see between 1 and 10 times every 4 years. A lot of the time when we do see each other, it's not all that intimate, it's rushed. We pass each other on a sunny day, exchange our news, and then go on to where our paths lead. The funny thing is, though slight cosmetic changes are sometimes detectable from one conjunction to another, my close friends never really seem to lose their familiar qualities. Sometimes it seems that they'll possess their familiar qualities for at least as long as I'll possess mine. That keeps me orbiting. Keeps me spinning happily, so to speak, on my way through the familiar and the strange. I think about other stuff all the time. Like, what if I just quit? Would there be a measurable impact? Okay, what would quitting mean? Just allowing natural forces to act upon me and not actively acting upon those forces myself? Seems a little silly, if not outright impossible, doesn't it? Right. How about if I stopped behaving as I was expected to? The only problem with that is, volume-wise, I'm fairly localized, and I'm not unusually dense. Expectation as it relates to tiny individual variables is a sort of cipher in such a large system. The impact such variables exert on overall expectation can practically be factored out altogether. All right, forget quitting as such. How about I just content myself with doing this for now? Da da dum da 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 dum da da dum da 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 dum 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 da 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 dum dum da dum da da dum dum. I sometimes worry that I'm missing out on the changes in fashion. That may sound strange coming from someone like me. Even if you don't know me personally, we've inevitably dealt with one another, at least peripherally, on a fairly regular basis, so you may have formed some idea of who I am and how I am. I don't just mean the fashion of what we put on, of course. For all you know, I never change clothes. I suppose that's a sort of fashion too. Never changing, or changing so gradually that it seems as though one never changes. I often feel as though the elements themselves play dress-up with me, as if I'm a personal paper doll of theirs. Perhaps I could be some venerable yogi who disappears into the wilderness, who sits feet on thighs as kingdoms accrete and crumble, becomes part of the wilderness itself. Speaking of kingdoms, that's more what I'd intended to signify by fashion, the revolving fashion of kingdoms. I felt as though I had an undeniable nationality. It might make it easier to contextualize my experience. Then again, one can hardly consider an individual armadillo several discrete organisms simply because he's comprised of a collection of plates. If you will, please pass my regards on to, let's say, someone named Oma. Hi, what's your name? Just write it on the lens from the inside and I'll be sure to check for it next time. Write it backwards if you can, so it'll be easier for me to read looking at the lens from the outside. Let's see, what to tell? What to tell? You can tell me something, you know. You want to host next time? All you need is a shirt and pants. 3 or 4 objects that you've come to be associated with, even if it's by complete chance. All you need then is a sort of bolt hole in the middle of nowhere. Doesn't have to be any bigger than a broom closet. Just make sure it lays along your cold, dark, and lonely path and that you reach it this time next time. Afterward, we could compare notes, trade tips, sink ships, crush bits, base hit, resubmit, dig pits, dirty mitts, throw fits, give shits, cash chits, pick nits, sharpen wits, get lit, keep fit, and never quit. All of it as we keep ringing the seasons and periodically restyling our geomagnetic field. We could do that stuff. Oh, look! Sorry for all the bad news I've played host to since way back when. I try to keep it in check by varying the climate, flexing the tectonics, and otherwise shaking up the habitats. But bad news has a way of finding footholds, handholds, and species holds, doesn't it? Of course, bad news often has good news on the other side of the lens. Maybe that's one of the reasons I'd asked you to write your name the last time. That way I'd have a form of address for the one I was engaging this bad news, good news rigadoon with. And again, your good news is also my good news, isn't it? I hope it is anyway. Instead of trying to keep this as general as I have, I'm just going to address Oma individually this time. Sorry everyone else, I'll talk with you again next turn. I promise. Hope you don't think it's too unfair of me, do you? Can you appreciate how lonely you'd get if you had always to address yourself to a faceless mass? Don't get me wrong, you're my favorite faceless mass. Still, you have to suppose that even the sea itself sometimes covets the chance to cradle a single starfish. Anyway, hi Oma. It's nice to see you again. Speaking of seeing you, I've always imagined that you're in possession of most of my favorite qualities. Yes, so you conform in nearly every way to those characteristics I hold the most dear. Of course, there are a couple surprises too. There are things I wouldn't have conceived about you. Those are there to ensure that you're more than just a projection of my own ego.
Finally, there's a particular thing that bothers me about you. So then, how is it that you imagine me? Why do I keep tripping this record button cycle after cycle while so many celebrated institutions have folded in the meantime? I think it's down to what's been called coherence. Things like geysers, cicada broods, the hyperfine transition of hydrogen, and the Postal Service are coherent. Now, it's not to say that I'll never fold. I assuredly will at some point. It's just that when I do, there'll have been some considerable prunings of my sub branch of the coherence tree. There'll probably be some natural force which ultimately accomplishes these prunings. Organismal boredom is the most devastating natural force I can think of at the moment. Hello, everyone. Or no one, as the case may be. I guess you could say I've had the ultimate experience in each of those scenarios. Anyway, I'm finished putting on airs. Not really any of those names I've been called by, and I'd like finally to start owning that truth. I'll start owning it the way you'd expect. Superficially, that is. I don't know. It's more of a jeans and t-shirt actuality trapped in an animal skin parka and palm frond underwear narrative. Know what I mean? I've got to be me. I mentioned something before about being more than just a work machine. I've been thinking more about what that means. I think it's less a prescription for not being active at all than it is an expression of resistance against being merely active. I mean, I've been useful in one way or another my whole life. That's just part of the physicalist fabric I helped patch together in my own paltry backwater and isn't due particularly to any personal inclination toward industry. Anyway, I think this backlash against stark usefulness is leading me insidiously and waywardly once again into mysticism. Times were that my leading indicators were celestial shadows. My favorite playlists were howling direwolves and dripping lifeblood. My taps rang good and evil. Instead of a work machine then, I'm aspiring to more of a work megalith. Excitement is an organismal thing, sure. You can also observe excitement on a historical scale. A single wave of excitement can ripple steadily across an eon. I've seen it happen. Of course, historical excitement is regulated quite differently from organismal excitement. Organismal excitement is a fairly well understood mechanism of the limbic system. Historical excitement, on the other hand, is a matrix of things like group psychology, technology, what might be termed herd discernment, and the velocity of progress in any given era. The breakdown of any one of those things can pull the plug on historical excitement. I've seen that happen too. It's like anticipating something every day for 1 billion years, and then finally forgetting about it for good the day it actually happens. Hey, Oma. How have you been? What? Oh. No, I'm still pulled into this orbital pageant thingy. Here. Yeah, the local groups roped me into doing it for another year. If I'm being honest with myself, I'll probably be cavalcading all my days. Anyway, question for you. Never mind what this place actually is. I'm gesturing past all the frames, by the way. What does it mean to you that it's here at all? I don't know, maybe that's the same thing. I just realized something. This document as such is lacking some fundamental coherence, isn't it? The cicada broods and postal service stuff. Either you know exactly why I'm here, possibly from what you've learned piecemeal about this overall thing, you would understand why I have to land back in the same spot along an established route when I do, or it doesn't much matter to you at all. So, assuming there's a good chance that the wherefores mean next to nothing to you, happy patron, I'd just like to tell you a true life story, which I'll probably have to split between a few sessions. What I intend to relate happened sometime before I undertook my present vocation, and so now I'm telling you about myself, rather than speaking via my role, which has become such a part of what I normally do, even here in this bolt hole. So then, back in the before, I worked in an office where the management hosted an off-site evening holiday party around the time of the winter solstice. The holiday itself was kept general, as it often is, and that's something I'm in complete support of, so I don't want to give you the wrong idea. As it was a generic holiday party, though, and a formal one at that, I wore a passable suit, blazer and button-down, as well as my nod to a holiday, which took the form of a necktie depicting a cartoon image of zombified mummies lurching abroad upon a moonlit night. Here's a photo from the event. I sat at the first table where I made eye contact with somebody who sat a few seats away from me at the office. They complimented my tie. I complimented their handbag, and we talked for around 10 minutes about the choices we'd individually made, which we felt landed us in our current positions, which neither of us understood as enviable positions to be in. Feeling somehow that I'd gotten off on the wrong foot, or that I'd possibly missed the point of talking about potentially anything with someone I barely knew and who barely knew me, I excused myself to go to the open bar, where I got a tonic water with something or other in it. I did a slow scan of the room, and by the time I'd scanned back to the table I'd been at, someone else was there in the spot I'd been sitting in. This time then, I sat at another table next to someone I'd personally worked with who had recently gotten promoted. They complimented my tie, I complimented their cufflinks, and we talked for around 20 minutes about how those old maps which depict everything plunging off the edge of the world into oblivion were the perfect metaphor for the supply chain at our office. And then I excused myself to get more fortified tonic water. I played a few rounds of this table roulette until this last time I turned around from having gone to the bar. At this point, pretty much all the tables had filled up except for one. There's a name tag at the empty spot of this one table whose name I couldn't make out from where I was. There were only name tags for about half the people who showed up, and I'd never received one. I didn't recognize anyone at the table. They probably worked on the other side of the wall from everyone else, but I inquired anyway and was told the seat wasn't taken. I talked with my seat neighbor for around a half hour, them complimenting my tie, and I complimenting various attributes of their ensemble and their essential nature. And then I finally noticed the name on the tag at the spot I was sitting, Oma Ursprung. Oma was someone I knew. It was actually someone I'd spoken with at length, always about just the right things. Just the right things in terms of those things which really mattered, even if they weren't all that profound. Things that I'd think about later on in the day, on my own time as it were, and realize that they were things important to the intrinsic person I'd become right up to that moment. I was surprised then that Oma wasn't there and that I hadn't noticed. At that moment, my seat neighbor casually mentioned that Oma had been let go earlier in the week, And at that point, the bottom really dropped out for me. I decided I'd make it up to Oma, that I'd somehow make it up to Oma that very night. I left the party, down the imperial staircase, through the striped awning, and proceeded out into the snowdrifts.